Oh, hello there. I'm sure you've seen a chair like this before, but not made in this way. Keep watching! So I recently just got back from an awesome class that I jointly taught with Justin Cook of Wayback Wilderness. We were out at his property out near Pensacola, and it was a great time. Met a lot of cool people out there, and a lot of learning happened, and a lot of experience was gained. One of the things that had come up, it was kind of towards the tail end of the class. We kind of rushed through it. Everybody's ready to get home. So I wanted to make a more detailed explanation for that student about kind of what we're talking about. We went through the motions, but I want to make sure he owns it. And so stay tuned, because it's very useful, very easy project, and we're going to get started. I don't even know what size bank line this is. Looks like about number 18. Obviously, the thicker the line, the more kind of comfortable the chair is, but it's give or take. I've carved this net needle out of a paint stick at the house, but we don't necessarily need this. It just makes our life easier, right? And so I'm going to load this netting needle, and from there we'll get started. So just in case you've never seen a netting needle loaded, well, let me show you how I like to do it. There's lots of different methods, but I have this flexible little tongue that I left in here. I'm going to kind of use my thumb to push that, and I just get it started. I don't even do a knot right here. I don't even care. It's got a little groove on the bottom here. And now I just keep that process going. I just keep rotating my needle until she gets full. Now there's something I want to talk about here. I've recently been hanging out with Mr. Usina out of St. Augustine, who is a master net maker. And if you see, he makes all his own tools too. Right, so look at the length of this tongue and how thin the actual throat is here. This is what somebody who actually makes nets by hands, needles, will look like. Those little short guys, they're kind of more for mending nets than making nets. But that's a whole nother topic there. But nice long needle so I can get a lot on there. Because it's annoying to be almost done and have to tie back in. But for me, in a primitive living aspect, you know, having this instead of the macrame type net technique of finishing a net is honestly more realistic, because if I had to make all this cordage, that's going to take me a while. And if I was doing an elaborate project like, say, a cast net or something, I'm going to work on that slowly but surely, and as I make cordage, I can keep adding it on to here, and once my needle is loaded, I can go to town. With the little macrame, kind of tie the knots, get them all hanging. You need all of the finished product right here before you can really start it. So here we have a macrame style net, and you can see the student did a very excellent job, like trying to keep it nice and even, but there's still, you know, you get a more professional product with a netting needle and a mesh gauge. This is great in a pinch, but what I found is nobody ever finishes them. This is more annoying and tedious, whereas this netting needle and shuttle seems like there's more to it, but it's set up to make it easier that you actually finish projects. That, in my opinion, nothing wrong with this. Not knocking it. Much simpler to learn and retain, but there's a reason there's artifacts like this. It makes life easier. Just another tool for the tool bag, and like I said, we don't even really need this. We can do this straight off the roll. But I'm going to finish loading this, and I'm simply going to cut this off. I still got a ways to go. It's kind of like watching paint dry. But as you can see, I'm just working my way around this, rotating the needle. pushing that tongue, rotate the needle, just like that. Once you got that full, you're ready for the next step. Basically, we've made a netted sheet of fabric. That's what we're doing here. I put this in there to keep it nice and spread, but we're going to start on this end, right? And if you can see here, there's basically like a hollow tube of knots, right? And so however many we make of this kind of determines the length of this, and the size determines how big of a stick we can fit in there, right? Now that's going to become important later. But if we were to count this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I started my net with 9 slip knots essentially, right? And that's about as wide as my hips are. If we look at the actual mesh, I don't know what size this is, but we'll try to replicate it. It's about, looks about 2 inches. I determine that. The bigger I make the mesh, the quicker this is going to net up, but you know, it might not be as comfortable. I don't know. This seat is pretty dang comfortable for what it is, and I can take this piece with me. I leave the rest behind, and it weighs nothing. So if I wanted to copy the exact size of this net, all I have to do is make something that's as big as this space on one of the legs. And I literally was just walking around, I found this old trap piece, and that works out great. But just for the fun of changing things up, we're actually going to use our iPhone for our mesh gauge, because this is something, you don't need to be out in the bush to practice this. You can do this in the comfort of your home, sitting on the couch if you want. So I'm going to grab my phone and we'll get started. This is just junk paracord I found laying on the ground, and I have a loop of line. I just threw it over this branch so I have a hook, so to speak. A lot of times if I'm making a net at the house, I use the door hinge. So I got my needle all loaded. I'm going to use my phone as a gauge, and hopefully I can film this clear enough so you can see what's going on. My loop of line on the tree for my first knot. All we got to do is a slip knot. We're making that first row that I'm going to feed the stick through. I determine the size of that. I'm going to use my phone to determine the space in between the slip knots. But if I want to branch, you know, about fist thick, I have to make sure that my slip knot is going to fit around that. And so I'm going about, I don't know, a 6-inch slip knot. So for the slip knot, all I'm going to do is throw a loop over my hand. See how there's a loop over my hand? And I've just made a circle. It's going to come from the back up towards the sky through that circle, and I have a slip knot. There's one slip knot. I like to do it twice just to make it less likely to move. This big thick yellow line is simulating the paracord that's on the branch on the tree, right? And we're going to start our first row of slip knots, the part that the branch is going to feed through. And I'm just doing this off a hank with no netting needle. Anyways, we're going to come in through the back, out towards ourselves. We don't need to leave much of a tail, but we want this to be big enough to fit our branch in. And so that first knot, I'm just tying a slip knot. I got a little loop right here. You can see that? It's going to come around both legs of my slip knot, the part that's actually forming the loop. And then I'm going to tighten it down. And on the video I was doing it twice. Basically 2 slip knots just to encourage it not to slip. Tighten that down right on top. Right? Now here's where the phone comes into play. We're using the phone to measure the distance to get a consistent distance in between the slip knots. So my next knot's going to look like this. I'm going to come around the top of the phone like this, around the back, up through the loop. I'm going to size it up. So I'm getting this knot on the top of my mesh card, phone, whatever you want to call it, and I'm throwing a loop. I'm coming around these two strands of my new slip knot. See that? These ones right here that I'm pinching between my thumb and my middle finger. There's my loop. And you can see how having a netting needle makes this a lot easier. But anyways, that comes through. Just like that. We're just making a slip knot. Tighten it down. Then I'm adding another one. So hopefully that's crystal clear now. There's my other one. So, just so I can control the spacing on here, I'm going to come over the front of my mesh gauge. Do like that so you can see. Coming over the front, around the back, up through this space up here. So from the back towards myself. And I have these two legs from this slip knot. I'm going to do the same thing, throw in a loop, coming around the back side of both my legs and up through that loop I just made. And there's my slip knot. Make sure this tail doesn't get in there. Now I'm going to do it twice just to back it up. Alright, let me try to do this in a way that my camera will show you what's actually going on. So we got one slip knot, two slip knots. I'm going for my third right now. You can see this space in here. That up here is my paracord, where my finger's sitting through. That's the space that I'm working this needle through. But before I go there, I'm going over the top of this, around the back, up through the space in my paracord, which I know is not in the frame, but hopefully that makes sense. This is one of those things way easier to learn in person, but you can do it. So I'm pinching that on my phone. All I'm doing is throwing a loop like this over the top of everything, coming in between that space right there, and I'm making a slip knot. I'm going to do it again just to back it up. So essentially this is going to be my first row. And I'm going to do 9 of these. Once I get to that point, I'll show you the next step. But just to show you again, you know, kind of without talking how quick it actually is. It can be. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9. I'm probably calling somebody. So there we go. I got my start. We just slip this off and we drop down for our next row. Not the best mesh gauge with the... Oh, no, don't call emergency. We got a nice even spacing between each of our slip knots. Now, this is going to be where our butt is. And we can untie this and thread it through. Basically, in my mind, I'm knitting this backwards. I'm meshing this up backwards. But so now, here's where it gets crazy. It's pretty much the same knot, but now having it on this rope allows me to flip it back and forth so I can work in one spot and keep going left to right. But right now, where this ended, it's on the right, so I'm going to flip it this way. I'm going to look for my next mesh, which is right here. I know it's tough to see with the bank line. And I'm going to get my mesh gauge. This is the line that's going to my netting needle. I'm going to go over the top of my mesh gauge from the bottom of my mesh towards myself. I'm grabbing it, I'm tightening it up onto my mesh gauge, and then I'm basically doing the same thing I was just doing. I'm throwing a slip knot. I got 2 legs of this new mesh that I just went through. I'm coming around and through, but I'm making sure I'm pinching this as I'm tightening. Right? And that's a sheet bend. It's real simple, but it can be challenging at first. So here's my next mesh. Right? Over the top, out the back of the mesh that I'm grabbing towards myself. Tighten it down to size it up. Throw my loop, come through that loop. Tighten it up. Now I tried to do something on purpose here. Let's see if it worked. It's going to be tough to see. But here's a sheet bend. It doesn't move. If you don't control where this knot ends up, you end up with a slip knot that can move on that mesh. See this? To remedy that, all you have to do is pull on both legs and kind of spread them open and flip that back up into a sheet bend instead of a slip knot. It's the same knot, it's just how it gets tightened changes it. Now, that knot that's in my hand is a sheet bend and not a slip knot. If I try to move the mesh on there, it doesn't. It's nice and tight. But so I'm going to continue that process until I get to my last mesh. I know this is real tough to see, the camera's not focusing. Until I get to my last mesh right here, and I'm going to flip it. And I basically just have to make this long enough for my torso, which won't take very long, especially with the iPhone as a gauge. So I just got to my last mesh on that row that we were working on. A little bit difficult with the grippiness of my phone case. Peel that off. Let's look at what we got. So that was the last mesh that I just did. It's over here. Having it on the string gives me the ability to keep working left to right. Now I'm going to do the same process and drop down and make my next row. But there we have our first real mesh that kind of gives you an idea of the size that you get from a cell phone, which realistically be a pretty good gill net size right there. It's only going to get your big salmon, whatever you're using it for. That's kind of cool to know. Cell phone makes a decent mesh gauge. But all your small stuff's going to be able to fit through there just fine. Anyways, let's drop a row. I'm probably going to have to film something else so that this is a little bit more apparent to you. But if you're already familiar with net making, I'm basically using principles from cast net making here to make my tube, my sleeve. If you've seen these chairs with, you know, canvas fabric, they typically sew a sleeve for that stick. I'm just doing it with nets. So right there, I just drop to my next row. All right, I'm coming over the top of this, through the back of my mesh that I'm grabbing, out towards me, tightening it down so I have a nice consistent size, pinching right here, throwing my loop, coming up between the legs, and tightening. Like I said, I think I'm going to have to throw something that I got to film indoors or something, so this is a little bit more high vis, but pretty quick process, and I'm going very, very slow so that you can see what's going on. Go a little bit more real time. Here's my last mesh. My fingers right here. I'm going to go over the top, through the back of that mesh, towards myself. Tighten it down to size it. Throwing my loop. Coming around the back of these. Peel off my row. Flip it. And essentially I'm going to do this until it's as long as I want. Try to get you a different angle here. We're going to start the next row. So I'm starting a new row. Getting this knot at the top of my mesh gauge. Coming over the top of the mesh gauge, around the back. I'm picking up my new mesh and I'm gonna slide it down until that tightens up. Just like that. Alright, You move the camera back just a little bit. It's very difficult to film because I'm having to reach. So I got that sized up. I'm throwing a loop. See that loop going, it's like resting on my left hand right there. Coming around both legs of that mesh. It's like that. And pulling it through. And I'm going to keep my thumb there so it doesn't turn into a slip knot. I'm pinching right here. I tighten that up. I'm going to go on to my next mesh. Over the top, through the back of my mesh, out the front, size it up, pinch, throw my loop, coming behind both legs of my mesh, through that space, tighten it down, sheet bend. That's it. Now keep doing that until it's about torso length. I'm thinking maybe 3 more rows after this one and we'll have it. I'll let you know. Alright, so we're almost ready to try this thing out. I just want some things to be clear. Alright, here's my last row. Alright, it's still connected to the netting needle. I'm literally just going to cut that off so I can remove my netting needle and use it for whatever else I want to make. I'm just cutting that off right here. So I took my loop of line off the tree. Essentially, this is where our little cross log is going to go, which is what this guy is going to be for. But how that's threaded in there, so it can spread out along it, we got to do that to the row we just ended. Right here. You just lay it out flat, start threading your line through the meshes. Let's see. Let's make sure this is wide enough for us. Certainly is. But so right here is my first mesh. I'm gonna take my cord and we're basically just gonna thread it through each of those meshes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you should have 8 meshes right there. Alright, that becomes the top of our chair. Just so this doesn't come off, I'm just going to secure it with a really loosely tied overhand knot. Just like that. And these down here are where we're going to do the same thing we just did with the line. But basically this is our slip knot row that we started this whole project with. Right? That's where this log goes through. And make sure you don't skip any. Find your first one and start passing your log through. Hopefully I made my slip knots big enough for this log, which we did, so we're money. So basically what we got here, if you're using the iPhone for this, you're going to start your slip knot row with 9 slip knots. Right? And that's going to give you 8 meshes wide, which is plenty wide enough. And we did 8 rows of those 8 meshes, and I'm going to sit here and test it for you. Should be plenty wide enough to give you that hammock chair effect. I'm just threading these on there one by one. I could have made this much longer, and this could be a stretcher bed, which I've spent a couple nights in. It's not just for chairs, but it's a good little quick project to practice that skill, because I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. The chances of me showing you how to do this once, even in person, and you actually retaining it and being able to perform it in the field is slim to none. It's something you got to practice and own, and then it becomes a versatile tool. Here's my last one right here. I'm going to kind of slide that down to the center of this log, and then it should all come together. So essentially what we got here, I've now spread it out. That's what it looks like on our support log right here. I've left this knot loose up top so that I can size this, because right now that's a pretty low chair. But I'm essentially going to shorten this so that it's just the right sitting height. And I just threw together a quick little tripod right here. I could have made this nicer. I didn't even bother to make the legs even, so that might give us some difficulty, but hopefully you'll get the point. So all I've done here is I've untied it, and I'm going to get it about where I actually want it, which is usually somewhere around knee high. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to tie a single fisherman's here. And I'm not trying to turn this into a knot tutorial. Real easy one. Just 2 overhand knots, but any old knot here would do. But that's about the right height now. Doesn't look all that pretty, but we can move some of that stuff out of the way. This will rotate. There. So just to give you a look of it, you know, there's where we secured. That's the net we just made as we traveled down. We got our little crossbar. Oh yeah! Oh yeah, that's a nice chair right there. It's a little lopsided, but hey, all I gotta do is trim a little section off there and we're back in business. But yeah, one thing, I didn't do it on this one, I did it on the other one to kind of widen it. But I mean, this is really comfortable. I can sit here, carve, do whatever, and it's highly underestimated how nice it is to kind of take a load off and not on the ground, you know. If need be, you know, I'm one of those guys who can fall asleep in a chair. This is, you know, a shelter option if you want. So, kind of cool, quick and easy, and it's something that in a true, you know, wilderness preparedness EDC type bag, I'm gonna have cordage. And having a technique like this lets me open up doors, basically. So it's something cool. A lot of people seen this chair, but not made like this. It's kind of my little twist on it. Is this something that somebody's going to remember, you know, if I show them once? No, absolutely not. So, you know, you got to take that with a grain of salt. But if you want to own a skill like this, you have to practice it. And eventually, you know, you do have it with you everywhere you go. You can figure it out. But it's not, hey, look, just go like this and do that. That's more so like that macrame type technique. But all in all, you're talking about maybe a 20-minute project if you know what's going on, and that, you know, that's including making the tripod and all that stuff. Took me about 35 minutes to film the thing, and hopefully you can see what's going on there. I made this video for you, John. I don't like kind of breezing through things, but we were all kind of spent out there, so hopefully you'll try it. Hit me up if you have any questions. And anybody that's interested, it's not really like something that's hardcore in our curriculum, but if you've been out to classes with me, you know, if I'm staying out here, I try to make use of the time. And so yeah, just bring it up to me and we'll try to whip one up. It's much easier to teach somebody this in person. But cool little project. What I like about them out here is I leave them out in the rain, sun, wherever, and they last forever. Way lighter than any sheet of canvas you're going to sew up and take with you, but just another tool for your tool bag. And it's a good little project to kind of start netting. Which netting in general, when done like that, is something that I actually finish pieces, whereas the kind of macrame way, I just don't have the patience for, and I'm pretty patient for the most part. But even silly things like this is a little bag that I sometimes carry, because people come out here a lot of times with more stuff than they can actually carry, and just having a net bag like this, I can fit all kinds of weird shaped things in here. And basically the same process we just went through. But 2 knots and you're in business. A lot of times I just throw this over like that. I can have like tarps and backpacks and all kinds of stuff in there. But yeah, to me, it's worth knowing how to net. Food applications, shelter applications, and if you're going to carry a roll of cord on you, the more techniques and skills you do have, you can turn it into whatever you want. It's now a multi-use thing. It's not just for securing things and for fishing. It's the world's your oyster, and that's kind of the point of learning stuff like this for me. Well, that about wraps it up for this video, guys. Hopefully you got something out of it. Like I said, this is a project, you can do this in your living room at your house while you're watching TV. Next time you're out in the woods, whip up a tripod, find you a little crossbar stick, and you're in business. You got yourself a little chair that weighs nothing to carry. But we did this with a netting needle. I can make a tutorial on that. There's plenty of tutorials on YouTube if you search, but just let me know what you need. If you like learning cool stuff like this, I highly encourage you to check out a class with us at American Survival Co. AmericanSurvivalCo.com is where you get all the information on that. And until the next video, guys, I will see you later. And John, like I said, I really made this video for you. I don't know how much interest there will be in it, but hopefully that kind of clarifies some of the stuff we didn't have time for. And thank you for what you do. Keep your head on a swivel out there and be safe, man.